Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hey, welcome back. Another edition of Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. And today with us from the Calgary area on the line, we have Tim Ryan. Tim's going to tell us all about his new book, East Grand Lake. So, Tim, really, before we get started, I've got to ask you, how curious is that rabbit of yours?
He's pretty curious. Most mornings when I open the door, he jumps right out of the room and runs down the hall to see what's going on around the house. So, yeah, he's good fun.
Now, how is it that a rabbit is a household pet? How does that work? Because we have a dog and two cats, but I've never had a rabbit as a pet. So, is there anything different with a rabbit than any other household pet?
Well, I don't think most people know that rabbits can be litter trained. So they're a lot like a cat. Like he uses the litter. So we have a room for him. We have a cat too. The only thing we've got to make sure is that the cat and the rabbit aren't left in the same room. We've been told the cat might actually hunt the rabbit, but so far they seem just terrified of each other. Every time they see each other, they run in opposite directions.
But apparently the cat is a bossy one too. So.
Yes. Well, she likes to sit on my shoulders when I'm writing and tell me when I'm doing something wrong. So, she's kind of my co-editor almost.
Well, the author picture you have in the copy of East Grand Lake we have has the cat on your shoulders. So I figured that's the best author picture I've ever seen. So it makes sense.
Well, people weren't believing me when I said, Rolo keeps sitting on my shoulders. And so that's just a selfie, me holding a C. And then when they were asking for author pictures, I don't have a lot of pictures of me. I take pictures mainly of my daughter and my wife because I'm holding a camera. I said, well, I got this one picture and everybody seemed to like it. So that's what's on my book.
Yep, that's what we went with. Tim Ryan, let's talk about your early life. Did you grow up in the Calgary area?
No, I was born in Montreal, and then we moved to Toronto. I did elementary and junior high and high school in Toronto. Then I moved, I lived in Saskatchewan for a couple of semesters of university. I've lived in Japan. I went to Cambridge for school, so I lived in England, and slowly made my way out to Calgary.
All right. So back when you were a youngster, do you have, you read a lot, I assume. Most writers do. So did you have any favorite books when you were a kid?
Oh, when I was a kid, I think I read just about every Hardy Boys book that ever came out.
So did I.
Yep. And yeah, I had a shelf full of them and basically saved my allowance until I could afford the next one. And I remember when I was, 10 or 11, whatever age it is you read those. My dad at some point said, you really got to try reading some other stuff. And so he gave me like Treasure Island and Catcher in the Rye and stuff. And that kind of branched out into, I actually studied English in university and, I still read all the time. Like there's piles of books in our house, either my daughter's pile, my wife's pile, or my pile. And we've constantly got at least one. I often have 3 or 4 books going at the same time.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. I have a whole bunch. Well, that's kind of my job. So I read one and then put it down and read a bit more from something else and then something else. So Tim Ryan's with us. The book is East Grand Lake, the first novel by emerging author and winner of the Alberta Views Short Story Contest. And one of the chapters in the book was actually one of the short stories that you won with. Is that right?
Yeah, that was actually a surprise. I only tried to start writing fiction again kind of late in the game, and I submitted, I think it might have been the second story I wrote to this contest that a magazine here in Alberta does, and I won, which surprised me a bit, but it also kind of gave me a little shot of courage there. And I always had this idea that you could make short stories kind of interconnected, where you've got characters walking from one story into the next story and back again. And if you did it right, it'd feel like short stories, but also like a novel. And one thing grew into another. The concept was a little bit nebulous at first, but as I was writing, I kept making more and more and more connections, and I hope it all weaves together into a coherent story.
Well, I think it does. And the book is about the summer of 1972. The whole family has come up to Grandpa Murphy's cottage, or cabin, as they say on the prairies, for their annual trip. But Shane doesn't like that, and we find out why as the story progresses. But one thing I liked is that the kids play Kick the Can. That was my favorite game when I was a kid. So did you play it? You must have.
Oh, yeah, no, we played all those games. Kick the Can was a favorite, and the story is kind of set in a rendition of the camp or cottage or cabin, whatever you want to call it, out in New Brunswick. And we would play all those games. But the one I remember most is Kick the Can because, you get the kind of clang of the can every time you kick it, and then everybody runs and is free to go hide again. And so it can last like forever. Right. I remember finishing very few games, and often it would be so dark out that we'd just get called back into the cottage before we could actually finish the game. But, you're constantly having fun, hiding, and there's a certain satisfaction if you actually do get to ever kick that can. Right,
and that's what you mentioned in the book. The kids just like to kick the can. They don't care if they win or lose or not. They just want to kick the dang can.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what I remember as a kid anyway.
Yeah, me too. So the book, East Grand Lake, it all takes place in one day. Now, did you plan it that way?
Yeah, that was the idea. I mean, I like books that are very kind of narrow in what their setting is and what their time is, because you can interplay on, just as action A is happening, action B must be happening somewhere else. And if they can fertilize each other, then you kind of get those extra layers of story that I kind of liked. And I think if you read the book carefully, maybe not, you don't even have to read that carefully, you'll kind of get hints of, oh yeah, this must be happening at the same time as something else happening. And for me, that just makes it feel like an authentic experience, which is what I'm really trying to get at with this book. Just something very authentic that makes you feel like this is actually one of those days you have at the cottage when you've got a giant family, which I did have a giant family. And it's those memories that you think back, yeah, that was a pretty good time.
Pretty good time. And I am assuming it was set in the prairies, East Grand Lake, because you talk about the golf courses with the sand greens, and that's what they have on the prairies for sure.
Actually, it's set in New Brunswick. It's just that, that's where my grandfather's cottage was. So it was very easy to set it there. Oh. But when I was growing up, that's one piece of kind of fact that we've got, because my uncles built this kind of mini golf course in the campgrounds. And for some reason that I could never even figure out as a kid, the greens were sand. I assume it was to slow the ball down because it's a relatively small course. But yeah, that's one of the things that kind of stuck in my head. Right. There's these little tiny greens. Like the greens aren't very big. They're like kind of 3 pizza sizes. They're little tiny greens.
Gotcha.
So you'd roll the ball along the grass. Yeah. And I guess the idea was the sand would stop the ball from kind of flying off into the woods, sort of thing. But it never, as a kid, I remember thinking, this is weird. Every other golf course I've ever seen, the sand is something you try to avoid. And this one, you're trying to actually get the ball to the sand.
To the sand, that's right. Yeah. Well, they have lots of golf courses on the prairies, like, with the sand greens. So that's why I kind of thought it was the prairies, although you did say later in the backup with a story about it that my information said it was New Brunswick, but the way the story opens with driving for days in the station wagon, I thought it might have been out to the west coast, or the west anyway. But that's just...
Well, I mean, that's kind of a Canadian experience, right? Hopping in the car and driving for days to wherever the heck it is you're going to go. Whether you're going from Calgary out to Vancouver or, Toronto out to Halifax, that's the nature of our country. It's so big and so broad that you can drive for days to get anywhere.
Yeah, and I like the fact you use a station wagon. I think station wagons should make a comeback. They're the greatest thing ever invented next to typewriters, I think. But, we have minivans and SUVs and crossovers now. Nobody has a good old-fashioned station wagon. I love station wagons.
Yeah, no, and we had a old country Squire when I was growing up, and it had kind of, I don't know if you remember it, it was kind of the fake wood paneling on the side.
Yep. Oh, okay.
And I grew up in the late 60s, early 70s, and back then seatbelts were, I'll call it optional if they existed in the car at all.
Right.
And I remember driving for hours and just my sisters and I literally lying in sleeping bags on the back and no seatbelt. We were just lying there talking and sleeping and watching stuff roll by.
Exactly. So East Grand Lake, your first book, but what's it feel like when those first copies showed up on your doorstep? What's that feeling like?
Well, I'll have to let you know because I don't actually have a copy yet.
Oh, no.
I've got a printed version of the PDF, so an electronic copy.
Oh.
But yeah, I haven't actually got a physical copy of the book. So it's when I do actually hold it, that's when I think, okay, I think I can finally call myself an author because I actually have a book now.
You actually have a book. Okay. So what... do you have a day job, or is this now your full-time occupation?
Oh, no, I have a busy day job. I'm a trial lawyer here in Calgary.
Oh.
It's a very small book, but it took me a long time to write because I'm writing in between what can be very busy days. So, yeah, it's neat to have gotten there. And I can tell you the people that I've told that I managed to write a book are going, how in the world did you find time to write a book? Because, most people, they're doing their jobs, they're hanging out with their family, trying to have some fun.
Yep.
It's hard enough to find time to do anything like the laundry, let alone write a book.
Right.
So, yeah, it took me a while.
So. Well, we're recording this on a Monday in May, Monday, May 8th, just to be exact. Did you have today off, or are you squeezing me in between court sessions?
I'm literally in my office right now with the door shut and a sticker on the outside saying, do not disturb, and hoping nobody will come barreling in the middle of your interview. Okay. But, I'm here right in downtown Calgary. I'm on the 15th floor of my building, and I'm doing this interview because, frankly, I've never been interviewed before, so it's kind of interesting.
Well, I've never interviewed anybody from the 15th floor of a Calgary office building either, so it makes a 2-for-1 here. You in the acknowledgments you talk about a writing group. A writing group must have been very helpful for you.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think I could have got through it without the writing group. I mean, you can write all you want, but unless you get that feedback from people who actually care about kind of you and your work, you never get to that point where you think, oh yeah, I totally missed that, or yeah, okay, in this paragraph I've got him wearing a red hat, and then 10 paragraphs later it's green. I better change that sort of thing. So it's really good. And it's almost as much a support group as a writing group. Like there'll be times when you can't seem to write anything, and there's times when you write a whole bunch of stuff. And the way we work it is 2 people from the group every 2 weeks submit something, and we all give comments back, and then it moves on to the next 2. So it's kind of nice. It also sort of forces you to actually write because, as I said, you get busy doing other things, but if kind of every 6 or 8 weeks you have to have something to hand in, it's almost certain that you're going to have something. It may be absolutely terrible, but at least they'll let you know it's terrible, and then you can go work on it.
I kind of wondered about that because it's always like, to me, writers are solitary people who don't want to be bothered by the opinions of others, but I guess I'm wrong, hey?
Well, you don't want to be bothered by people, and I'm sure there are some writers out there who can do it all themselves, but for me, anyway, sometimes I'll be writing stuff and I'm fully immersed in it, but, I'll have stuff in my head that I think is on the page, and then when you give it to someone else, it's important for them to say, okay, this doesn't make any sense. Like, where did this motorcycle come from or something like that?
Right.
And then you realize, oh yeah, that was just in my head. I didn't actually write anything down. So I find it a very important part of bouncing ideas off of people. But you are absolutely right. Writing is mostly a solitary experience. It's just that once every 2 weeks, you kind of go out.
Yeah.
And you get to interact with people, and, working on other people's writing and giving commentary helps you with your own as well, because you think, oh, I do that too. I better stop doing that. Or you think, that's a good trick. I'm going to see if I can't adopt that into my writing somehow too. So it's a learning experience, really.
Good. And I guess I was going to ask if you have a routine, but obviously not. So you write when you can?
Yeah, I don't. I know you're supposed to have a routine based on everything I've read, and all those authors I admire seem to write a lot. But for me, it kind of comes in bursts. So like two weekends ago, I just got up early because it's starting to get light out and the birds were starting to sing nice and early. And I was all alone, and I just sat down for an hour, and I wrote a short story from start to finish in an hour. And then it'll need polishing and stuff, but the bones are all there. But then I'll probably go for another 10 days or a week before I can put pen to paper again. I know that's probably not the wizened version of the ways to write. I read Stephen King's on writing, and he writes every day. And I know another author in town, Allie Bryan, and she writes every day from like 5 o'clock in the morning until people get up. But that doesn't work for me. I'll sit there and not accomplish anything, or I'll write something down, and the next day it'll be like, that was terrible, and just delete it all anyways. For me, it really is about there's moments of inspiration. And once you've got those, you've got kind of the seeds of whatever it is you end up finishing. So it's almost never, I've written that thing out, and that's the thing I send out into the world. But that's the thing that forms bones of what become the story or the book that people ultimately see when I release it. But without that moment of inspiration, I don't think I write very much. I don't know why. That's just me.
Gotcha. And just before we wrap it up, Tim Ryan, the first book is East Grand Lake. Any others in the pipeline?
I've got 2 others that are going. One's about, I'd say, 80% finished. The other one's kind of a quarter of the way through. But I'm also trying to take a little break here and do this author thing a bit of justice, because, I'm new to it, and I know there's things like doing interviews and things that are helpful both for the publisher who was kind enough to take my book, and for me to learn how to be, I guess I'll put in quotes, a good author. So I'm trying to focus on, okay, what am I doing? I've got a little website now. I've got, a book launch that's coming up in 20 days or so. And I get to do stuff like this interview with you, which is all fun. I mean, it's all new experience for me, so I'm really enjoying it.
Well, I'm glad, and I want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy day today and every day for talking with us, and continued good luck. Maybe we'll talk to you next time another book comes out.
Well, I'd enjoy that a lot, and you have a nice day too.
Thank you.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.